Hey everyone, I'm here today with my friend Emily Reagan, the founder of the Unicorn Digital Marketing Assistant School. And Emily is about to give us a crash course in hiring and how to make better hires or even make your first hire if you're currently working solo in your business. I am so thrilled she's here to share her knowledge. Thank you, Emily, for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It's fun to help business owners find good help in their business. I've done the same kind of back end work for a long time, and I know how much it can move the needle.
Absolutely. And in fact, speaking of moving the needle, I know we all love data and metrics here. So if you apply what Emily is sharing here today, you could free up to 10 or more hours up in your work week in your business by, again, hiring the right help for you and your team. So before we get into that, though, Emily, I do want to ask your Cubicle to CEO story because that's the first question we want to ask all our guests. How did you actually make this leap into entrepreneurship?
Well, my story is very similar to yours as an accidental freelancer. I was a military spouse for 20 years, always moving, always changing jobs, and I just kind of stumbled into it. We had gotten orders to move. I was leaving my dream job, which was a PR and communications director, and I just started writing press releases for some local clients. They just needed my help. And I fell into it. I didn't see the business I was creating. I didn't have the vision. It was just kind of one project at a time. And my first project was a $300 media kit for a blogger slash influencer. Didn't really know what I was doing, but had the fortitude to Google it and put together my background with other types of press kits. And then it just opened so many doors, client after client, until I was booked out. Eventually, I started training, very smart, overeducated, underemployed military spouses, a lot of stay-at-home moms who were looking to get back into work, how to do the same things I had been doing for flexible freelance work.
I love that our stories have so much alignment there in terms of down to like the dollar, down to that $300 first client project. That's so funny. You were probably, honestly, having worked as a publicity director, you were probably a little bit more refined than I was. I feel like my first proposal was just like a bulleted point Google Doc. I went to meet the owners of this business at a restaurant because I didn't really know how you take a client meeting or how you get someone to sign on as a client. And so, but like you said, it was just baptism by fire. You just go through it, and each client project, you learn a little bit more, you refine your process a little bit more. So that's encouragement to any of you out there who are listening who are newer to business. Just keep in mind a lot of the overcomplicated systems that you see other people doing may not be your fastest path to your first dollar in your business. And if you can just really simplify, like Emily and I did, and then use that experience to refine over time, you will be better served by that, in my opinion, at least. All right, Emily. So you help business owners free up 10 plus hours a week. And one thing that really caught my eye when we were preparing before this interview is you said this: a real business requires investment in human capital, but we have to be smart about where we spend it and how we track it. Can you just expand what you mean by this? Like, maybe walk us through your hiring approach, your hiring ethos. How do you think about hiring?
This is such a good question because I think we're in this day of online businesses where it's so easy to get started. There's a low barrier, there's a low cost, and then we're not thinking long term what it takes to run a business and how our business is successful. How do they get out of that startup phase, right? And it takes human capital, and that's because what fuels a business is time and money. And so human capital can do both of those things. And so I see so many newer business owners, really excited about the possibility of transforming and moving their skills online and then not being realistic about the budget and the cost. Right. So we think about that too. And then there's another thing happening in this space where we see very successful people, you and I, but we're not always aware of the teams behind them that are making it happen. And so we start kind of dogging ourselves and comparing ourselves and not being realistic about the work that goes into the level those people are at. I mean, love Amy Porterfield. I'm in her world. I'm one of her referral partners for VAs, but like she has a huge team, right? She has a whole content department. And so we cannot compare ourselves to somebody like that. Everybody successful has somebody behind them. Even the Instagram influencers, people are helping them book those brand collaborations, like style their outfits, take the photos, write the captions, schedule the captions, reply to the DMs. Like people are helping in those businesses and we just need to know that this is happening.
I could not agree more because I think, it's hard to outgrow your mentality when you're starting, when you wear all the hats and you're used to playing every single role in your business. It can be difficult to extrapolate and like look at someone who's more advanced in their business development and thinking like the influencer example is actually an excellent, I think, analogy for this, or not even analogy, just an example of this, how when you're starting as a full-time content creator influencer, obviously you're all the things, but over time it's almost like you graduate into the role of just talent, similar to how like a news network, right, like an anchor on the show is just playing the role of talent. Now, obviously, that's a very important role and probably helps to make or break the success of the show. But there are people who are producers behind the scenes, like you said, writers, camera people, makeup artists, lighting, sound technicians, like all of those people have their own role. And on screen, when you're watching at home, you only see the news anchor. And so I love that you kind of helped us, reframe our mindset around like what are all of the people that are actually necessary to make an engine run. And I feel like that actually is the hurdle for most business owners is because they're used to playing in every role, they have a really hard time understanding like what is the first thing that can be let go. So, talk to us about even before we get to like who the right first hire is, let's talk about how a business owner can prepare themselves to even be ready to take on a team member and to hire. What is your hire preparation process?
I love this question because it will solve all the problems that come later that I'm sure we'll talk about when we're not happy with our current hire and how to get back on the happy path. But the first thing you can do, because we don't always have the budget to just hire the whole content team and all the makeup artists, right? We need to be smart. And so that time audit, being aware of what you're spending your time on is really important. And it's not just all of the things that need to be done. It's also the things that you don't enjoy, the things that are waiting till Friday at 4 p.m. You wait to the last minute in your drudgery zone to complete. But it's also creating awareness about the task and the things that will actually move the needle, like at the beginning here. So we need to be aware of what will save us time and what will make us money. And in some cases, it makes sense to go all in with a specialist who will help us hit our main goal and make money. An ads manager is a really good one on here. You had Nikki on the show talking about like the performance of her ads, and that is something that you do want to trust somebody to do because you know it will make money. But we're not all of us are in that spot. It's not the goal for everybody. So that time audit will help, and a lot of business owners don't really have that awareness, but it will tell you what are the chunks of things that I'm spending time on that I could offload, because we have to think about our dream business. Where do we want to be? And when we're at capacity, what are the first things we need off our plate? And start moving toward that now, even if it's very slow, because you need to be prepared in hiring, delegation, like getting that clarity and those clear roles on your team. It does take time. So I would start with the time audit. And then another thing we have to talk about, we can't skip this part, is the very sexy SOPs, right? The standard operating procedures. Being able to bring someone on your team, you might not have the most perfect onboarding process, but being able to say like, here, this is how I'm doing things now, so that they have direction and they know where to really start and plug themselves in, so they are not a burden to you. They can actually take things off your plate.
That is the one thing that if I could go back in time, I think, and change anything about my business, it would have been starting to document those SOPs from day one. It would have made everything else so much easier. And I'm so glad that you brought up this idea of a generalist versus a specialist, because I think that's another confusing area to navigate, right? When, let's say, a business owner does a time audit and they realize a lot of the tasks that are either draining their time or their energy are kind of scattered across different specialties, different traditional roles. Like maybe there's some marketing tasks over here, some admin tasks, some operations based things, some more data entry, finance based things. If they're seeing this kind of mess, if you will, of random tasks that don't seemingly have a through line, would you suggest hiring a more general person to take on those repetitive tasks first, even if they don't have necessarily like a particular rhyme or reason to them? Or do you actually suggest trying to hire for a specific lane first, even if it's not as like granular as, oh, we're only going to hire an ad specialist, but maybe it's like grouping together like tasks for, let's say, content and only hiring a content person first? What are your thoughts on that?
My answer is kind of like both and all of it. But just like you and I started our freelance business and we evolved, we can do that with our team too. And so I have kind of come up with this term unicorn, and that doesn't mean a unicorn does everything, right? It's not humanly possible. Some of us are left and right brain and good at many things, but you don't set someone up for success when you just dump, your entire business on them. So what we can think about is hiring within 6 different business departments. And there can absolutely be overlap between those. But where we don't set ourselves up for success is when we're expecting an admin person to be able to video edit. And then it's like we're just like dumping everything on them. So the 6 business departments are operations, customer service, HR, accounting and finance, product development, and marketing and sales. So I'm kind of in the marketing department with my marketing assistants because I saw this need for like a higher, a savvy, more marketer in this department. But we can overlap operations and customer service pretty easily. But what we don't want to start doing is then throwing in a bookkeeper. Right. So there are some roles that are separate that really need to be separate. We can get someone into, I call it the mail room, and have them work up. So then when we are ready for that higher level, you said like content manager, we've kind of groomed them to be there, or we can hire someone specialist at that point. I know in my business, I'm getting to this point where, okay, now I'm ready for A players. I have like expected lanes. Like I do want the head of the department, and I am going to go hire out for that. But I've also seen the admin assistant or the ops assistant grow up to be the OBM, which is really, really fun when that happens because it's somebody who knows your business so well. So people get really unhappy with their VAs when they are expecting an admin person to know marketing or sales, And so we just have to be kind of smart about where it overlaps, and it's okay to have some.
That distinction, that breakdown of those 6 departments and like what areas can have overlap versus which one should stay entirely separate is extremely helpful. So you mentioned, for example, like operations and customer service could potentially have overlap. Are there any other departments that you see being able to mesh well with another department at the early stages and then can kind of grow more separate as your resources and staff expand? Or is operations and customer service really the only place where you would suggest seeing more of that overlap?
Yeah, well, I see marketing overlapping a little bit with product development. If you have somebody like I have some people in my world who are former teachers and good with curriculum design, they could overlap with product development. Usually that's, the head CEO is you and me with our ideas trying to execute on those original ideas, but marketing can also overlap with operations, especially now that we have AI happening. And then we have this whole area of client fulfillment, depending on how our business offers are. If you have a, paid coaching program, if you have a course, if you have a membership site, sometimes you can overlap community management or that, client fulfillment with marketing as well. So there are areas. What I don't see usually overlapping is almost easier to talk about the oil. What is it? The oil and water? Like,
Yes, yes.
why am
Things
I
that
messing
don't
up this
mix.
analogy? Accounting, there's not a lot of very numbers driven people who also do marketing. Those tend to be very separate. Marketing can be a mix of creative and analytical. And then, sometimes customer service requires a very just well-rounded person too, who can work in different departments and really understand what's coming up, because customer service and accounting can overlap too. When you're talking about the dunning process in your business and you're trying to recoup payments and failed payments and customers are kind of disappearing. So yeah, I think you should feel empowered to kind of create the roles that you need. But when you do that time audit, exactly what you said. You're able to like bucketize some of the tasks that make the most sense and create your own job. What I hate is the term virtual assistant. And I know that's what we use for SEO. I mean, I do it with my own podcast, but really I want to encourage anyone listening to this to think about the job title and the outcomes that you want instead of just this blanket term that really means nothing.
All right, I want to harken back to two things real quick. The first is you briefly kind of mentioned these two terms, customer service and customer fulfillment. And I feel like I have a pretty clear definition of what those two things mean in my business. But since you've worked behind the scenes on so many other people's businesses, I'm just curious what you would say is the difference, how you would distinguish those two roles, customer service versus fulfillment.
Ooh, now I'm nervous I might have a different, but I see fulfillment as being in a group coaching program and you need to make sure your students are showing up, that they're getting what they need. You know, they're at the meetings, they're getting access to the right courses and the right video trainings, things like that, or whatever you promised in the sales process, like you're making sure that is fulfilled. I see customer service a little bit broader than that and still including the inbox because you have past clients, you know, reaching out, asking questions. There's troubleshooting with login information, things like that. So you might not actually be in a live cohort, but you still want to, you know, represent your business and your brand and take care of the people in your community. Is that what you think?
Yeah, actually, I mean, you were obviously using a coaching program as like the example of an offer, but that's exactly on the same lines of what I think. Like fulfillment to me is whatever your product or service is, it's the delivery of said product or service, like whatever your customer is buying, how are they actually receiving what they purchased? And then customer service to me is more like after the purchase or even during the purchase, what are some of the, like you said, technical issues that come up, or maybe other, sort of billing issues, let's say, just questions in general that may not necessarily be tied to delivery, could be, but more so like just managing that client relationship, I would say.
Oh, you're good. Yeah, you got it. You nailed it.
I love it. It's really great though to hear like specific examples because I feel like that helps people kind of, wrap their brains around how that might look in their business more. And the other thing I just wanted to really quickly point out before we move on to the next question, you mentioned like this idea of almost thinking about starting someone in a mailroom. Now, obviously, many of us have online businesses. We don't actually have a physical mailroom where someone's like sorting mail, but it kind of made me smile because weirdly, at the first and last, I guess, corporate job I ever worked, the CEO of that company literally started in the mailroom. Like I always thought that was such a fascinating story that her like her first job at that business when she was hired was literally like sorting and delivering mail in the mailroom. And then, however many years later, like when I arrived on the scene, she was literally the CEO. And so
Wow.
yeah, you never know, I guess, where someone could advance to in your business and what the potential is. And so, anyways, I just wanted to throw out that little inspiring anecdote.
That's awesome. And it's true. I talk to a lot of business owners and I talk to a lot of people behind the scenes. And I mean, for 6 years, I worked with Jennifer Allwood in her business. And I started off with that media kit, like doing little piddly things, doing Pinterest. It was important because it grew her business, it grew her brand, but I just kept taking on more on and more. And, I don't know if you know Sean Kennel. I always say his name wrong, but the YouTube guy, I was talking to someone on his team and she did the same thing, started out just learning the ropes, impressed him with her work ethic and her brain, showed that she was not here just to collect a paycheck, and then rose up the ranks to an OBM. And so that happens all the time. And it's okay to not have this high level job position that you are putting out there, that you can really nurture someone inside your business.
100%. Yes. And sometimes, like, just like we don't know things about ourselves in this moment, as even in the leadership role as a CEO, oftentimes, things are kind of made aware to us as we're moving through the doing. And so I can see obviously why that would translate to your team members as well. And I wanted to circle back real quick to an earlier thing that I promised I would circle back on, which is your kind of delineation of all these different roles and names that we hear, especially in the online business space, I would say. So I'm just going to read a few of these acronyms that I'm sure we've all heard, just one way or the other: VAs, versus DMAs versus OBMs versus DOOs versus CMOs. Like, wow, a huge mouthful. It's like a whole other language. But you had said earlier, Emily, that you don't really love the all-encompassing term of virtual assistant, which obviously is the one that stands for, or that VA stands for. So talk us through each of these different ones. So like a VA is a virtual assistant, a DMA, what does that stand for?
Okay, so we have, VA, which confused me when I first started because my clients were calling me that. And coming from the military world, I'm like, veteran, Virginia, like, what the heck is this?
Veteran
It's just
affairs,
not,
yeah.
yeah, I was like,
Yeah.
what is happening here? And so I think it's just important that you clarify the job title, and then that will help you figure out what are the outcomes that I want from this person and not be Frankensteining some unrealistic role. Okay, so DMA, marketing assistant, we're really seeing this term really grow. Like, more people are becoming aware that marketing is its own thing. They want someone who understands the algorithms, might not have the strategic capability to set the plan and create the strategy, but can implement the strategy. So the assistant can come in different ways. And it's not just, oh my gosh, I'm hiring a TikTok specialist. I'm getting someone who can feed the different algorithms, to do different things within marketing. So we also have one we didn't mention, the executive assistant. This person is managing the calendar, the inbox, just making sure the C-level person can do their best work and frees up time. And so an executive assistant is a lot of what we think of. I think people think of when they think of VA, but that's also confusing there. One of the things that we hear a lot of is this whole OBM. I think that might be trademarked, but it's OBM, it's online business manager. You could also hear virtual business manager, digital business manager. I mean, this is acronym city here. But basically, this assistant, this implementer, this, doer grows up and starts managing the projects and managing the day-to-day in the business. And so this person isn't always doing the work, but they're making sure key contractors have the things they need to hit the deadlines and move forward in the business. And so we can take that same manager idea and apply it to every department. We can apply it to the programs you run in your business. Like, I now have a manager for my course. It's a 12-week course. We're learning marketing services. I need a dedicated person to oversee all of the moving parts. And that's the same as a social media manager. You think about it, they're overseeing that and executing it. And then we hear this term DOO, director of operations, and that is even more higher level. Now we're really getting into the strategy of it. Someone who can read the numbers and understand kind of that C level. So it gets confusing when a lot of times all we really needed was an admin assistant or some kind of implementer within a certain department. So I like to keep it simple because it's a lot to take on, when you're a new business owner.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny because me and some of my friends will joke that the online business niche in specific likes to make up our own language for things that in the corporate world or in like other types of businesses are, for example, like the OBM, right? In a normal, I say quote unquote normal, as in like not in this industry, I feel like an OBM would just be a project manager. Like that's like you walk onto a construction site, you're like, who's the project manager? They know what that is. You go and you say, who's your, I guess it wouldn't be online, but your BM, like your business manager, they might not, they'd be like, our office manager. Like, these are all different terms. And so, yeah, sometimes I think to your point, we overcomplicate something when really it's just like, what is the actual outcome that needs to be fulfilled? And like, who is the right person to serve that role in our business? DMA, just to clarify, digital marketing assistant, that's like what you are known for, right? Who you train in your unicorn digital marketing assistant school is like people who learn these different marketing skill sets and then can be employed by other businesses, primarily, I assume, online businesses who need that extra marketing assistant support. Is that correct?
Yeah, thanks for leading me into that. So, this whole marketing department, we think we can just do it all. A lot of us are marketers when we start our business, or we might enjoy it, but then very quickly it becomes very time consuming. I mean, we're supposed to be posting to all these social media platforms, sending out our weekly nurture email and showing up at on other platforms with signature content. And then we're supposed to be guesting on podcasts. And it's all these things that really can add up to that 10 hours a week you're talking about, where if we do get help, we can offload some of that. And your marketing assistant is the person who can be formatting, pushing buttons, who can be, content repurposing for you, because that's not the work that you need to be spending your time on in your business.
Right, absolutely. And CMO, that's like that last title that we didn't really touch on. I mean, this is more of a traditional role. You could go to a company like Disney and be like, "Who's your CMO?" Your chief marketing officer, and they're going to have one. When do you feel that a small business graduates from just needing, marketing assistant support or even a marketing manager to, let's say, manage a few specialists under them to truly needing a CMO or someone of that skill level, of that caliber to step into the business?
Ooh, great question. I think there's usual, revenue marks that we want to hit before we start bringing in the high level managers. So probably above, 100K in revenue, you're going to start needing additional help, right? And then above 250, it's time to start thinking about, that project manager, that online business manager, and getting that help. Luckily, in the online space, we do this thing called fractional services, and we can kind of find ways to contract with people, but not bringing them in at that Disney employee level. So we can get a brain in our business who can come in, set the strategy, set the goals, and then let other people implement it. So it really depends on where you're at. I know for me in my business, I'm starting to drown in all of the marketing, and I'm realizing right now I have a marketing assistant. I am going to need that marketing manager or a launch manager, because that is what's sucking up my time. I'm spending too much time in Asana assigning tasks to people. I'm like, okay, Emily, it's
And then
time.
following up on those tasks, right? And making sure they get done correctly. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and that's what the manager person could do. So for the fractional CMO, I'm going to say you're getting closer to 500,000 in your business, where now you need that elevated messaging stamp, that person who really understands where your business is going and can set the direction, help you get there. That's probably that level.
Yeah. It's interesting too because, I'm thinking as this relates to our business, and that I'm very open about our business finances. We've shared it freely in our income reports for years now. And our business has made more than half a million for the last 4 years, right? 4+ years. And to this point, we've never had like a senior marketing leader on our team, such as a CMO. And I do feel like it's a little bit maybe unique to my background, having like my professional background being in marketing and then even starting my business as a marketing agency. So, like, it's probably a little bit different than, let's say, if you were like a family therapist starting a business and marketing is not your forte, it's not your zone of genius. So, I recognize that there may be that factor at play, but I only say that because if you're listening to this podcast, I love bringing on experts like Emily because you can kind of give yourself some like guidelines, some frame of references for like what may be more of a average milestone for when you can start to consider some of these roles that you need to bring on. But also just keeping in mind too that if you excel at marketing or if you genuinely enjoy it, you may not need that role just because you hit a certain milestone. So, anyways, I digress. I would love now to chat with you, Emily, about finding good teammates because that's probably the hardest part, right? We can know who we need help or know what we need help with and who we want to hire, but then finding that actual person can be a whole other ballgame. So you have a little hot take that you don't love finding people from UpWork or from agencies. Tell us why, and where do you recommend business owners go to look for this type of support instead?
Okay, I have to preface this, and everyone listening to the podcast is the same. There is a reason we left the cubicle, and there is a reason we're doing our own thing. And so, to attract top talent and to not be in this place where you hire someone, bring someone on your team or contract with them, and you're just more miserable because they can't deliver or whatever's going on, we need to be aware of this like freelancer culture and what we can do. So the reason I don't like agencies is because they are the middleman. Now they can help you get started. You're in a burning fire, you need help fast, you need someone trained, but the top talent is going to go off on their own. They're not going to be working for less, letting someone else skim off of it. And I have seen that time and time again. And then I've heard of a lot of people disappointed with different agencies, and I won't name names. Now, the problem with Upwork and hiring marketing, what do we call those marketplaces? Is that we tend to get more of the project one off work. And the point that a lot of our listeners are at is we need ongoing, loyal people in our business who are dedicated to us and treat our business like theirs. So we're looking for that entrepreneur. To bring back Disney, we have Walt Disney, the face of Disney. We also have Roy Disney in the back end making everything happening. So we're all kind of secretly looking for a Roy Disney who doesn't want to be the face of the business, who has the brains, who will grow up from that marketing mailroom with us. And that person could be on Upwork, but generally we're seeing lower rates. We're seeing more one off projects and people who don't really get it. We want someone on our team to take leadership, to think about the next step, to connect the dots within the different departments. And so that's why when I talk to a lot of our peers and fellow business owners, they're not always happy with their VA. It seems like they kind of come in and just do the bare minimum and they don't really get it. So that's my little spiel about that.
No, I love your take on that. And I do have a question about getting team members more invested. But before I ask that, I would love to hear your perspective on where you like to go and source these types of assistants instead of Upwork and agencies.
Yeah. It's even hard in my own marketing because I'm like trying to appeal to the woman who is intrinsically motivated, right? Who has that follow through. So it's something I'm always kind of working through. But my favorite two places are one, within your own community. You have people following you on social who already know your brand, who are already passionate about what you do. That could be a pretty seamless transition if they have skills. So start with your community, send an email, do a social media post, let your community do some of the work. We might want to talk about what that looks like to write the job description, share it, not get inundated, maybe have a collection process. I mean, that's like a whole nother thing, but you know, don't be afraid to post that to your community. But also, speaking of, Roy Disney and this, entrepreneur, there's a whole secret network, an underground network of people behind the scenes who don't have websites, who aren't dancing on TikTok, who are looking for work. And I mean, for 6 years, I helped Jennifer Allwood, grow her email list to 80,000, make $1 million. I didn't have a website. I was not the smartest freelancer. I was not like doing those things, but I didn't need to and I didn't want to. I was happy doing the work and having the impact I had through her business. So talk to your business friends. Find out who's on their team because they're going to know people. If they're not available, they'll know people. And I think that's kind of a roundabout way of doing it. But, we're having these Voxer chats. These top people are in masterminds. Like we're passing around names and sharing who's good and who follows through.
Absolutely. And I can attest to both those things. Whenever someone's like, I need a digital marketing assistant, you're one of the first people I refer people out to. I'm like, go talk to Emily. And because you literally train people on this all day long. So like you have such a great community you can pull from. But also some of my favorite hires, I will agree with you, have come directly from my own community. Two of the coaches, for example, that we had in my mentorship program before we retired it in 2022, they had been with us for I think 3+ years. And they were people who had gone through our curriculum themselves, applied it successfully, and were really then able to help support our incoming students from the perspective of both like being trained under me in the actual methodology, but also being real business owners themselves and applying what we were teaching to attract new clients in real time. So some of my favorite people I've worked with have been directly from my community. And so I really, really want to, highlight that for our listeners. And also the piece though about like being invested, right? Like finding people who aren't just here for a project to do the bare minimum. This is a common struggle, I guess, that business owners have to face is, are we going to hire contractors or are we going to hire employees? And there is that kind of debate, right? Over, is an employee going to be more invested in your business because they're working only on your team versus contractors who have multiple clients to juggle, but then may be more specialists and may have more ideas from working with multiple different clients. There's pros and cons. I think, me personally, I don't think there's a right or wrong answer here. It just kind of depends on a lot of different factors in your business, frankly. For our listeners, just so you know, for context, in my business, I have two full time employees. So W 2 earners, the whole shebang. We've got benefits, 401k, like all these things, they're on payroll. It's a much bigger responsibility. And then we also have a few contractors that we work with on a very specialized lane or for a very specific scope. For you, Emily, having worked with so many different business owners and now also running a very successful business yourself, what's your general take on contractors versus employees? Do you lean one way or the other, and why?
Ooh, I love it. I love it. I think most of us are in that place, that starting place to bring on the contractors and start small, because it takes time to grow that part of your business. And then as you're making more money, you will see people shift into the employee zone. Where a lot of people make mistakes is misclassifying their contractor as an employee. I feel like we have to talk about that because a contractor has to show up with skills in your business. You do not train them. You give them a tour of your business and you expect them to get to work. Contractor has a contract. You don't want to get in trouble with the IRS. And you can't require them to be at weekly meetings. You can't require them when they have to work. There's all these little nuances to the contractor space. So if you do probably have, that general need that you were talking about, it might make more sense to get an employee. But if you're seeing more specific carved out little buckets that you can pass on, I like to start smaller with contractors and test them out. But here's the thing, not everybody wants to become an employee either. My friend Braden, a tax attorney, he just assumed every VA wanted a full-time job. And I'm like, no, a lot of us are wanting to work during school hours. Like my business is part-time. Like, let's be real. I got 4 kids. I want to end at 5. When does the bus get here? 2:30. Way too soon. But there's so many little nuances here. Is there's no right or wrong. But what I don't want people to do is run out and feel like they immediately have to get an employee and overextend themselves and not have the budget. All the things you talked about, benefits, 401ks, like figuring that out, like we might not be at that level yet. And that's okay.
Yes, 100%. And as further assurance of what Emily is saying, I did not start out with a full-time employee out the gate. I would not have been ready for that. I made my first full-time hire in the summer of 2019, but prior to her becoming full-time, I had hired her literally for one project. It was like a tiny little project, and we worked well together in that capacity. And I was like, "Oh, would you like to expand your role a little bit? And I can train you on managing some of our client accounts." Again, at this time, we were still a social media marketing agency. And then, that grew and grew, and then, started taking on different other things under her scope. And then kind of came to a point where I was like, look, you can continue doing, what you're doing in a contractor position. Or if you want to join me as a full-time employee, I would love to have you. And then that ended up being the right choice for both of us at that moment in time. And so, yeah, I definitely agree with the fact that you do not have to be 100% gun ho out the gate, because it is a huge responsibility. There's like a whole other slew of things that come with employment law and so much paperwork. Like, I was not prepared. I did not realize, I think, in stepping into that process. And so I always, love to provide that extra, just be aware of all the things, like you said, that come with having employees.
Ellen, I'm curious though, who was the first person you brought in? Like what were the first contractors? And I know you did an agency and I did an agency at first too. But like who were the first people you brought in to help you out?
So my very first hire, contractor or employee, was Paige. Shout out Paige. Paige also actually eventually became our first podcast producer before Sabrina took over a number of years ago. But Paige was that person that I was describing, who I hired for a very specific project. I was running an influencer marketing campaign for a university bookstore, and I needed help on the data side, like pulling together the reports, because we had like 11 or 12 creators that we were managing under this campaign. And, she did an excellent job. So I started assigning her different social media client accounts. She started working on like the captions, hashtag research, actually scheduling the posts out. And then in that summer, when she became a full-time employee, she really took on that podcast production role. And also a lot of our social media content was created and managed by her. And then it's funny, again, how much things can change and how fluid you really have to be in the team space, because Paige was a full-time employee with me for it's kind of hard to remember now because this was back like 2019, 2020. I think maybe almost 2 years, and then she actually decided to step out on her own, and she's really, really talented and really passionate about wellness for women, so she decided to step out as a coach, a health coach for women, and I loved working with her. She loved working with me. And so then she transitioned back into a contractor role as a coach for that program that we have since retired. So at this point in time, she no longer works in my business because that program no longer exists in my business. But, from 2019 through end of 2022, she had some sort of role in the business. And that's just the evolution of one person. And over past 5 years since I first started hiring help, we've employed, I think, maybe 5 employees at one point or another. Actually, it might be 6, 5 or 6. And then dozens of contractors, honestly, that we've worked with throughout the years.
Yeah, the contractors can really come in and augment what you have going on when you're at that level. For me, the first person I brought in, because I was doing the agency thing too, the point where I was doing most of the client work, I brought in a bookkeeper. Because for me, I had this awareness of one day a month, I hated my life. As much as I love numbers, I love getting money. I would be up till 1 or 2 a.m. sorting the invoices. Now I'm a little bit older and I didn't have HoneyBook I could have done things smarter, but it was like 2017. I'm like, I hate this. I'm spending so much time and this isn't billable hours. So that's when I kind of created this awareness like, wow, I need help. And it's not that I can't do it, but it also was something I just found myself kind of dreading and it took a lot of time away. So I got a bookkeeper and then I did have, women working with me in my agency. We were doing a lot of content marketing, Pinterest, SEO, blogging, not that really that much social, but having that help with the clients was important because we got it systematic where I could just kind of come in and get my stamp on it, but they could do a lot of the legwork.
Yeah. Honestly, I could not emphatically agree more that one of my best hires early in my business was a finance team. I was one of those people I am so afraid of misstepping in the tax department because I'm like such a rule follower when it comes to taxes that I was like, I cannot even bear the pressure of trying to do my own books because, like, what if I accidentally miscategorize something or miss something like an important tax form, whatever it may be. So basically, 2018, I was a true freelancer in the sense that even under like a tax classification, I was filing my taxes as a sole proprietor. And that's this is a whole other tangent I'm not going to spend a ton of time on, but just so people are aware, I think a common misnomer is that if you have an LLC, then you are somehow filing your taxes as some sort of different classification. You're not. An LLC is just a legal entity. All of the money still passes through to you as a sole proprietor unless you are filing taxes like as an S corp or as a C corp, or like your business structure from a tax classification is actually different. So these days we've been an S corp since 2019, but in 2018 that was the only year that I did not have like a bookkeeper and an accountant on retainer through the whole year. And even though it like my invoices were very few that I had to manage that year, I was still so stressed out, honestly. So I I love that help from like I'm so glad I don't ever have to manage my books. It's just about for me, it's like I love looking at the numbers, the end of month reports with my finance team, but it's like from an analytical like strategy side of like how can we optimize, not like how do I reconcile this transaction with my bank? You know what I'm saying?
It's so easy to get stuck in those weeds, and I mean, that's really why we're talking here today. I'm thinking about my business here, like, I've managed podcasts, and then it comes to my own podcast, and I'm gonna sound like such a diva, but I don't wanna do it. I don't wanna write my show notes, and I mean, there's amazing tools to help it go faster, but my marketing assistant, Shannon, who actually graduated from my program, just, like, makes it so all I have to do is show up and be the talent. I don't have to worry about what wonky thing is Lisbon and Apple Podcasts doing right now. Like I don't need to spend my time on that. And what else does Shannon do? She helps me with blogging and making sure my SEO game is really good. So we're, showing up every day on like page one. She's repurposing content because after being in business for 4 years, there's so much out there that I don't even need to be the content department as much anymore. I mean, I know our messaging is refining, but I just had a launch in the fall and I was going through some things personally and I couldn't quite show up in social like I did the last launch. And she was just able to go pluck things out because I don't have a full-time social media manager and just augment what we already had and just stay aligned. And I think that was the beautiful thing about having a marketing assistant who gets it, who knows what I'm trying to do, is trying to collect testimonials, trying to gather, voice of customer data, trying to create leads all at the same time. She's not just like posting and, forgetting. So much time is freed up just because I have Shannon in my life and I can do the work. I'm very capable of doing it. I also don't want to anymore.
And that discernment, right, is everything. That's the wisdom of running a business for many years, is knowing where you can absolutely shine and add more impact to your business and where you could but shouldn't honestly be. And so I really appreciate your honesty around that too. And I'm glad you actually started listing out some of these specific tasks that Shannon plays in your business, because it kind of flows perfectly with what I wanted to ask you around what are some of the specific tasks that a digital marketing assistant can do for anyone who's listening. Since that's your specialty and that's who you train up into other people's businesses, can you just kind of walk us through some of the most common tasks that you see DMAs take over?
Yeah. Okay. I don't know where to start here, but I'm going to paint a picture with email marketing because we all know, that's an asset we own and we need to be developing. And we don't realize how much time it's sucking up. So for email marketing, you know that you can spend 2 hours formatting it. You can be figuring out your link triggers and then you can hit send and then you move on to the next thing and you kind of forget it. But a good digital marketing assistant is going to set you up on a schedule, get things done ahead of time so they're not harried and you're not making mistakes, because that's when all of our worst like oopsie subject lines go out, right? Like something was like kind of thrown together. They're going to track, and you kind of mentioned this too, the reports you were gathering in your agency. They're going to track and report it and then give you those numbers back. If it's not weekly, it's the end of the month. So you're getting the high level look at what's actually happening in your business. So you're really getting to a new elevated place. Like we start off, in that startup phase doing things really messy, like we both did. But now we're ready to really hone in on what's working in our business and refine it and make sure it's repeatable and it's smooth sailing with no mistakes. So email can easily be 2 hours, maybe another hour with, all the reporting and tracking. When somebody's in your email and they're really understanding your segments and your audiences and they're like tracking like who clicked the sales page, like you don't have to hold those tabs open. You could just say, all right, we are going to do a last minute email. Sorry, not sorry. And this is who you're sending it to. And you don't have to worry about it. Right. And that person can then start to understand your automations and, really go over, audit your funnel, see what's working, report. If we're not all paying for funalytics right now, and there's software out there that can do that, but like that's really expensive. So someone who has an eye on your automations, who's making sure, oh, you know what, that's going to your old masterclass. We should probably change that. You want that forward thinking person. So blogging and SEO, I mean, we're seeing a big comeback with that with AI. I love AI, but I don't have time to be running through that. And I just want someone to take my podcast that I did, this one with you, grab the transcript, have a field day with making content for it. And I've already shown up and done the talent. Another thing that we don't think about is all the stuff that sets up the marketing machine. We're supposed to be gathering that VOC, that customer voice of customer data. And there's all these like little places it is. That marketing assistant will set you up to work with your specialist. And then you can just hand it over. Like you hire Safira to come in and write your sales page, and you could say, Safira, here is all of our VOC. And here's what they are saying in the DMs. Here's what they're replying back in emails. This is what they're saying, on our surveys. And you can just have it very organized and easy. And from there, your marketing machine builds, because what do we need? We need social proof. We need testimonials. We need someone who gets that. and who can set us up, because you and I don't have time to go record anything ever, but go with the past client and then chop up the video and do all of the things that we know will elevate our marketing. And there's so much within that too, comparing to our competitors, like all of that analysis that could be happening. A smart marketer could assist with affiliates. I did that a lot with Jennifer Allwood. I started creating content for her that she was getting paid for clicks. She wasn't involved at all. So now I'm making money for her and I'm able to help her show up across different platforms with content that she had no time to do. Community management's a big one. I know I'm going rapid fire, but community management, having somebody in there who understands that ops and that marketing and can really nurture the people in there, but extract the testimonials at the same time. That's a big one. That's usually one of the first roles people need help with. They have a free Facebook group, they have a paid group, and they need someone to just manage it, making sure the events, people are getting the emails, the ad event calendar is up. I talked about affiliates, and then it kind of opens the door to pitching for podcasts. Like you can have your DMA set you up for that. So all you have to do is hit send on some of the pitches. If you're really organized and systematic about it, your marketing assistant can really take over so much that you were holding space for before.
Yeah, absolutely. Super insightful. Thank you for that quick kind of rundown of like all these possible ways that a digital marketing assistant could help someone in their business. I hope for those of you listening that gave you some fresh ideas for, oh, I didn't even think that was a place that I could maybe outsource right now. So, to wrap up our time, Emily, I could talk to you all day because like the topic of hiring is such a broad and expansive subject, right? So, we really could be here all day. But to wrap up our time, I feel like an important thing we haven't really discussed yet is pay and budget and thinking through, right, the finances of can I afford to hire help? What does that look like? What is reasonable and ethical and realistic, right? So give us your thoughts on a budget, like what are the typical market averages you're seeing for different types of work? And then maybe also like, do you have any sort of approach or perspective on pay in terms of maybe incentivized reward based pay or, raises or anything of that ilk?
Okay, yeah, this is a fun topic and this is everyone's question because we're scared. We don't want this surprise invoice at the end of the month and to be blowing out our budget. So, if you're getting an implementer in your business, somebody who's really like doing the work, not setting the strategy, not necessarily managing, they're going to be about $20 to $30 an hour. I mean, keeping in mind the top talent is going to go up from there. That might be someone who's a little bit newer, right? And that's okay. That's okay if they're coming to the table with skills. Above 35, let's say 40, $45 an hour, above that, we're starting to get more into the managers who really understand the outcome that you want and can help you lead you to that, that final output that you're looking for. So managers are the good ones are starting at 45 and then you're going to start to see OBM 65, 75, $100 an hour. There's this whole field of creative specialists. Some of them might be hourly. You might be able to get a tech person in your business helping you set up some funnels. They might just do hourly because it's easier, and they could be anywhere between $50 and $100 an hour, but they might be also quoting in projects. And so you start to see that a little bit more, and you don't have to be as worried. I think hourly is a little stressful for us because we don't really know what the outcome is, and it discourages efficiency. And so I think you just have to have a little level of trust with the person you're hiring that they're going to do the job. And I'm going to bring it back to like, what is the outcome you want? If you have someone in your inbox, tell them, I expect 24-hour responses, 48-hour responses, inbox zero by Friday. Think in terms of that so you can set them up for success. And there's that. And then you can also find contractors to work with you within a day, which is really fun. There's a lot of people doing these VIP days where you can get through a punch list, get through it fast, because a lot of people are expecting fast turnaround times, high quality. Like you want to get all of that all at once. So a VIP day could do that for you. Okay, I'm now trying to remember what your other question was. Help me.
That was really great. Excellent, by the way. And I also do want to add in a note here. I'm assuming, and feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, I'm assuming all of these kind of like market averages are based on hiring contractors. I do feel that employees are a slightly different conversation. And what I would just impart on any of our listeners, if you're thinking about hiring employees, is it's not a direct translation of, I think, hour for hour, dollar per dollar, because with contractors, keep in mind that you are not responsible for any of their taxes, any of their business operations. It's just like, here's your, like, let's say, here's your $25 an hour. And then they have to manage those funds. Whereas with employees, you are sharing a significant portion of their payroll taxes. You are likely paying into benefits. You're likely paying into retirement. And there's many other, paid leave, vacation, all of that. Keep in mind, those are things you should factor into what is the overall compensation that your business can support in hiring an employee specifically.
Yeah. No, I'm glad you said that because employees will be less expensive on an hourly rate. Contractors will charge more because they're paying for all those things out of pocket. And so I think I'm glad you brought that up because people are surprised by that. But they're saving you money because you're not committing to 40 hours a week with them. You're getting them in. And there's a lot of, very smart moms like me who might only want to work 5 or 10 hours a week, and be available. And that's the sweet spot. That's finding your unicorn, someone who can be passionate about your business and meet you where you are and what you need. What you don't want to do is give somebody this blanket, like, go to town, do whatever you want, like you need to communicate your budget and what you have. Now, a contractor sets their own rates. They tell you how you should pay them. They will take that lead, but you can give them constrictions. Like, what is that for you? And that's up to you to look at your finances and know. And it's okay to say, for now, it's this, and I'd like to grow as my business grows. Nothing wrong with that.
100%. Yes. And I love the flexibility of that when it comes to working with contractors, that you can expand scope over time. So, like we said at the very beginning, start small and you can evolve with someone. The other question I had, the second piece of that question, Emily, was just what's your take on performance-based incentives for either contractors or employees? Like, do you have a general approach that you teach people around raises at certain times or giving people bonuses for certain scenarios? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah. And I'll say first, it's not always about money for a lot of us. A lot of us freelancers, we're here. We love to be a part of a team. We love to have this new professional identity, creative expression. There are ways to reward people outside of money. I love being on a team again. Yeah. Going on the team retreats. Like when my clients send me a box of pizza when my husband deploys, like little things like that go a long way. If you do want to keep your talent, you do want to be expecting to reward them and compensate them fiscally too. When I'm involved in a launch, again, I sound like a diva. I do expect a launch bonus. If I'm a critical part of your success and I see you making money and I'm bringing ideas to the table, like those bonuses are very important, right? For my buy-in and for keeping up the culture of the team. Um, there are options too when it comes to profit sharing. You'll see launch managers do that. They might come in and be like, well, I'll take 10% of this revenue for managing that. And you can see how that works because it's hard to quantify what goes into a launch. And sometimes, bidding something hourly, if someone's not an employee, that makes sense. I'm actually coming to this, I'll call it, problem with a couple of my original marketing assistants who now have been in seven-figure businesses for a while. And they are more of a factor and they do want some more compensation. So we're talking about ways to do royalties or affiliates and profit sharing when it comes to them creating new products for their client. And it's kind of a sticky little situation. I feel like I'm opening Pandora's box, but typically the contractor owns the copyright unless that's specified. And so you want to have this conversation and make sure everyone's on the happy path. And people who have a good work ethic and are really motivated, they're just going to love being appreciated like that.
Yeah, that's a really actually excellent disclaimer to make people more aware of, is this idea. You really got to look at your contracts, right? And it's so helpful to get legal support in this area. But like to your point, a lot of times when people are signing on as employees, anything they create during their time with the company is a work for hire, meaning the company owns that work, right? Whereas to your point, as a contractor, sometimes that's not always the case. And so great point to make people aware of. Again, like I said a moment before, I feel like we could deep dive into that topic for an hour. But Emily, thank you so much for your time today. Thank you for sharing your experience both working as, you know, in someone else's business, but also training up other people who have worked in other people's businesses. I feel like you bring a really unique perspective to this conversation. Where can our listeners continue to connect with you? Or if they are like, Emily, I need your help, I need some help in my business, how can they connect with you so that you can connect them to the right assistance?
Thank you so much for having me. This is a fun conversation, and we're just like skimming like the top of the iceberg here. So first of all, if you're like, yes, I need support, I need somebody who's really marketing savvy and who can come in and take charge. If you go to hireaunicorn.com, I will share your job opening with my membership. It's called the Digital Marketers Work Group. We have all kinds of virtual assistants, marketing assistants, specialists, and beyond launch managers in there. And you're getting just a good, reliable, honest person when you come to my community. We're very supportive of each other. And if you're listening to this and you're thinking like, oh my gosh, like I actually love the tech in my business and I love doing this for my business, like maybe it's time to start offering this service. I can teach those services in my Unicorn Digital Marketing Assistant School, help you set up your business, but also help you, get hooked up with clients and keep advancing inside our work group too. So you can check that out. Just find me on Instagram. You'll get all my links. I'm at Emily Reagan PR.
Awesome. Those links, by the way, will all be below in the show notes. So scroll down, click, say hi, send Emily a DM today to start that conversation. And thank you all for joining us. We will catch you in the next episode.